Hey, everybody. Welcome to the GMI Rocket Show. Today's episode number 147. I'm your host, Roman Zelichenko, former immigration attorney turned entrepreneur. I am the co founder and CEO of Laborless, an immigration platform that automates H-1B visa and perm compliance, and also the founder of GMI Rocket, which is a digital marketing agency focused on the immigration and global mobility industry. I'm really excited about today's episode. As I said, 147. We're almost at 150. So many conversations I've had. It is crazy to me. Today's guest is Irina Rostova, who is an immigration attorney as well, but now the founder and CEO of a company called EB-5 Support, EB5support.com, that effectively, among other things, helps immigration attorneys build their EB-5 practice, get information and up-to-date, news and things about EB-5, get insights about the investor side, about the developer side. There are so many resources in EB-5 support. There are webinars and community groups, etc. So I'm really excited to have Irina on the show to talk about kind of how she went from, well, first how she moved to America and her immigration story, and then how she became an immigration attorney, and the journey from going from and being an immigration attorney to being a business founder in our industry, solving a problem that maybe she experienced herself. I very much align with this, having been an immigration attorney, worked on H-1B visas, and then launched Laborless to solve the compliance problems that I saw in the space. So really excited to have that conversation today. Before Irina joins, I want to give one quick thank you to the main sponsor of this episode, 8 a.m. DocketWise. So DocketWise, which rebranded last year as 8 a.m. DocketWise, is an end-to-end immigration case management platform that has best-in-class immigration forms, customizable questionnaires in a lot of different languages, tons of different integrations with calendar apps and payment apps. Even my company, Laborless, have great customer service. A lot of people actually use DocketWise even just for forms. I mean, that's their bread and butter. DocketWise also provides a lot of resources for the immigration industry. So they've got a really good blog. They have free ebooks. They've got a podcast that I was on as well a while back. They support this show and other things in the industry. So they really, I think, give back to the immigration law community through content. So I really appreciate that about them. If you are in the market for a case management platform or even just forums to connect with your own case management platform, check them out. The website is 8, so the number 8am.com/DocketWise, or visit the link in the show notes. All righty. Without further ado, Irina, thank you so much for being here. I am excited to have this conversation. We've known each other for a few years, and so now it's like the opportunity to share the story of your entrepreneurial journey with the world.
Hi, Roman, and thank you so much for inviting me on the show. I always love chatting with you, so it's such a pleasure to be here.
So as both immigrants, both of us, we have pretty similar stories in the sense that, former Soviet Union, moved to America, became immigration attorneys, and then effectively launched businesses to address the thing that we were, we had our experience or expertise in as immigration lawyers. But before we get into that, because I think that's really important, and I hope all the immigration attorneys that are watching will walk away with something in terms of not necessarily EB-5 knowledge, but how to get support. I was actually in a group chat the other day, and someone said, "I have an EB-5 client, and or somebody inquired about EB-5s. I'm not really sort of comfortable. Who do I like? Can anybody help me?" And so I immediately wrote in the chat, "Oh, you should talk to Irina." So I think there's a lot to be gained. But before we get into that, I love diving into the background, into the story of the guests. So you, like myself, moved to the U.S. from the former Soviet Union, but you grew up. You spent a little bit more time there than I did. Almost for me, can you share what was it? What do you remember about kind of growing up? What was it like your early childhood like in the Soviet Union? Because surely it's different than growing up here.
It is. It was very outdoorsy. I mean, I grew up, and I'm sure everyone's experience is a little bit different, but I think I was very fortunate. I grew up in a very small town in what is now Lithuania. So when I was born, it was still the Soviet Union. Within a few years, it separated and became Lithuania. Um, I grew up in a small town, 20,000 people, completely surrounded by woods and lakes, and very safe, very nice. The town was actually built in the early 80s because the Soviet Union built a nuclear power plant, and they built a brand new town
Mm.
for those families who were going to work at the power plant. So I like to joke the average education level in town was a PhD, because there were about 5 or 6 thousand, engineers and scientists that lived in town and their families. So it was very small, but highly educated, very safe. And we spent most of our days, kind of our free time, outdoors.
Mhm. It's interesting because my grandmother actually, when she was born, because her parents were moved somewhere, I forgot where, frankly, in the Soviet Union, to help build a hydroelectric power station. And so same
Mm.
thing. It was like when they arrived there was basically nothing, and then by the time they had left, a whole town had been built around this big infrastructure project. So I think that's pretty cool, pretty unique. I think probably for the Soviet Union, especially around that time. Were
Mhm.
you, you said surrounded by woods, so were you kind of running around, in the woods playing in the forest all day? I mean, were there other kids your age?
Yeah, I mean, the whole town was a lot of young families. So
Mhm.
there were a ton of kids, and um, this is what I lately then took an interest in urban planning, because I think good urban planning can make such a difference for people's level of happiness who live in that town. So my town was fully planned. It was walkable. It's almost all the buildings were condos, 5 to 8 story condos, and they were like in these little micro communities where you have a few buildings, you have a huge playground in front of them, a grocery stores within a walking distance, schools within walking distance. So because the entire town had a master plan, it was very convenient. Like, we as children traveled on our by ourselves. When we were 5 and 6, we would go to the local store, we would go to the school. And my specific building that I lived in was on the edge of the town, because the whole town was like an oval. And on the edge, so the view from out of my window, it was just pine trees. So because
Wow.
this oval was densely developed and packed with all the commercial buildings and so on, and around it, and it was about like a mile radius, and then all around it is just woods, and Lithuania has a lot of lakes. So what was really great is I would walk out of my house, go through the woods for maybe half a mile, and we had a beautiful lake with a really nice sand beach.
Wow.
So just as kids, we were either on a lake, or obviously, because we were kids, like one spring we decided that we wanted to catch snakes. I'm pretty sure
Right.
it was my idea. So there were a lot of like garden snakes in the
Right.
woods, and when spring would come and they see the sunshine, they would find like a sunny spot and would warm up. So they were really easy to find, and we decided we're gonna catch a bunch of them and try to train them. And then we brought them to the playground, and then the boys wanted to join in. So we just did random projects like that, but very outdoorsy. Don't get me wrong, I still watched a lot of TV as a kid, but I did appreciate the fact that we had this opportunity to kind of explore outside a lot.
Do you feel like, because it was such a relatively small community, do you feel like you kind of were, I don't know, let's say raised by the community? I mean, could you go to other people's houses and you knew their parents, they knew yours, like you could go over for a meal or something and it was okay? Was it kind of like that a little bit?
100%. And again, I think part is like urban planning will lend itself
Mhm.
to that, and then culture sort of forms around it. And it makes it so much easier to raise kids. It makes it enjoyable to raise kids versus stressful. So yes, my the the next door neighbor, so the person who had the apartment next to us, my parents could just leave my sister and I when we were 6 and 7, and they could go, to run chores. They would tell the neighbor, because all I had to do is if I needed something, I just knock on the door next to it, or she would come in and check in on us. Um, I'm fortunate enough to where now that I live in the States and the suburbs, I'm raising my own kids. I have the same relationship with the person who owns the house next door to mine.
Mm.
So, like, we're very close friends and we just watch each other's kids. But yes, when I was in Lithuania, my parents were friends with a lot of people in the building. Usually, you would have all the little kids play together in the playground, and there would just be one supervising parent, right? So,
Wow.
one person would kind of sit and supervise the 10 kids playing so that all the other moms could be at home doing laundry or cooking. So, very much a communal effort.
That's cool. I was just talking about that with somebody the other day about how stark the differences are when you grow up in a community like that versus kind of everyone fends for themselves kind of place, especially in New York. So I love to
Mhm.
hear that. So how old were you when your family left the Soviet Union to move to America?
I was 13. I just turned 13.
What do you remember about that time? Because I mean, I when we left, I was 2. I mean, I don't remember really, unfortunately, anything. But you had gone to school, like had friends and all that, and then
Mhm.
suddenly you were kind of moved, completely plucked out of your life at a pretty vulnerable age. I mean, 12, 13, 14 years
Mhm.
old as a teenager is a kind of a very developmental time. I don't know. What was that like for you? Were you excited? Were
Mhm.
you sad? I mean, were you, I don't know, curious?
I was definitely excited to move because the
Mm,
US was like the dream, and we were kind of
mm,
all very curious about the Western culture, the American culture. So I was very excited to move, but it ended up being a very drastic change and not how I originally expected that it was going to be. Because in Lithuania, I grew up with a lot of independence. So because we lived in a small town, I could walk around town with my friends as a child. And then for 2 years, we moved to the capital. So when I was 11 to 13, I lived in Vilnius, which is a pretty sizable city,
mhm,
700,000 people. But because it's European, it's very walkable. So once again, my sister and I just kind of walked around, went to concerts, got together with our friends on our own, and we also traveled quite a bit when I was a kid. I know that's not the story for a lot of people who were raised in the Soviet Union, but my parents, because this was the 90s, my parents started their own business and it just enabled us to travel like all across Europe as well. And then when we moved to the US, although I was super excited to move, we didn't know anybody in the US. We met one family shortly before our move, and they happened to live in Novi, Michigan, which is as suburban Michigan, I mean, as suburban American as you can think. So the only attraction in town was a mall. And there are no sidewalks. Everything is completely spread out. So you can't walk to your friend's house. You can't
mm,
walk to the mall. You have to be driven everywhere. So when we moved, because we didn't have a network of friends yet, we just ended up being stuck in our house. So my
mm,
sister and I were really bored. We lost that freedom, that ability to move. And then just kind of would wait like every 3 weeks, it would just align that one of our two friends would invite us over. But it was really tough for the first 2 years because it was an entirely different lifestyle that was hard to integrate into. Like we didn't move to New York like a lot of families do. So because we moved this like in this undrivable suburb, it was a rough adjustment.
Do you remember, as an immigration lawyer, I know we kind of talked about this previously a little bit, but I guess your family had thought about moving out of the Soviet Union to a number of different locations in America, kind of worked out, for lack of a better
Mhm.
term. now that you've looked back on that, since you've helped, I don't know, hundreds, thousands of people do the same thing as as an immigration lawyer, what was like, I don't know, was there a push factor, I guess, away from the Soviet Union? Was there just a pull factor to go to a Western country and, I guess, start to grow the business? You know what I mean? And kind of, I don't know, like, were your parents trying to move as entrepreneurs or as refugees or something in the middle? I guess, if I mean, to the extent that you know.
Well, I learned since I moved, because at the time I didn't really know which
Right.
program we were moving on. I have since learned that we moved through the program that was essentially like it doesn't exist anymore, but for a lack of better term, it was like a brain drain program that the US had, where it encouraged scientists and individuals with a certain level of education from communist countries to apply and come to the US. My parents applied for this program, I believe, in 1990, when the Soviet Union was going through a lot of uncertainties and they didn't know what to expect.
Hmm.
My dad sent out applications to numerous countries. I learned later that he applied to Germany, to Australia, to some other countries. And within a year or two, they actually, a lot of these applications got approved, and we could have moved to Australia or to Germany. But by then, my parents started their own business in Lithuania. So they
Hmm.
started their business in 1991, and it was going well, and they decided to stay. 7 years later, when they completely forgot that they even filed any applications, we got this giant yellow envelope from the US saying, "You've been invited to an immigrant interview in Moscow. Like, your application got reviewed, approved, you're invited to this immigrant interview." And that's when my dad remembered that he applied for some program in the US as well. It took another 2 years post that interview to actually get our immigrant visas, but um, the reason why my parents decided to move then is there was both a push and a pull factor.
Hmm.
There was a pull factor in the fact that everybody believed there were more financial opportunities, business opportunities in the United States. But the push factor was there was so much uncertainty in Lithuania. I mean, imagine one giant country separated in, multiple countries. So, like, all these little states separated, and then laws were being established, practices were being established, and half the time you didn't know under which rules you were even
Hmm.
operating, because those rules and laws were being written as businesses were allowed to operate. So we went from a socialist communist regime to capitalism. All of a sudden you could own your own business, but then the IRS didn't know how to treat you. Well, the tax authorities, the Lithuanian version of the IRS. So there was kind of instability there. We didn't know if Lithuania was going to become part of the EU. And there were also safety risks, especially early 90s. Pretty much anyone who started their own business and was making money, you had two or three mafia, local mafia people that would find you and offer you quote unquote protection. And if
Right.
you didn't pay them for protection, then somebody would come in and set your house on fire, or would beat somebody up or murder somebody. So it's unfortunate, but my family went through that personally, where, you know, us and our friends have been, like, we've been threatened, we've gone through the dangerous aspects of it. And so my parents felt like Lithuania can, I mean, the United States can provide that safety
Hmm.
and opportunity for especially my sister and I.
Yeah. Wow. Um, it's interesting. I wonder, first of all, your life would have been so different if your parents just obviously up and left and went to Australia or Germany. Um, but it's, I wonder if at that time, I'm just thinking out loud, but I wonder if at that time, Australia or Germany were even still on the books, or as soon as they heard from America, they thought, okay, this is the one. But either way, that's, the fact that it's a push and pull and you had that opportunity, uh, as business people, it makes sense that they said, we got to go. I mean, we have to at least try this. Did you have
Mhm.
to get rid of your Lithuanian citizenship, or were you able to maintain it?
So Lithuania is one of the few countries that does not allow dual
Mm,
citizenship. Um, and so I have not been able to renew my, like, I'm kind of waiting for them to change the constitution. So hopefully one day they will change the constitution
yeah,
and I can renew my Lithuanian passport. But I became a US citizen some time ago. So right now I only have one passport.
yeah. Did you, so were you kind of quote unquote stateless for a while? I mean, because you probably had to give up your Lithuanian citizenship and then apply for American citizenship.
It's great that we're discussing all of this on YouTube. I
Ye-
never gave up my Lithuanian citizenship. I don't know if it
Oh,
technically
interesting.
gets taken away. I don't believe it does. I got my US citizenship because we came in already on immigrant visas. So I was a
Hmm.
green card holder the day we arrived, right? So we were processed as permanent residents.
Right.
And so I was a green card holder. 6 years later, I became a US citizen. And um, I don't know what the official procedure is for Lithuania, but
Yeah.
I certainly don't want to give up my Lithuanian citizenship. In my understanding, because they don't allow dual citizenship, I'm not eligible to renew that passport in the moment, but I
Yeah.
also haven't tried. So I'm going to hang
Yeah.
out and wait and see what happens. I think a lot of Lithuanian citizens who were born there, they're in the same situation. When
Hmm.
Lithuania ultimately was able to join the EU, the European Union, a lot of young people moved to other European countries, started
Mm.
working there. Then they may have gotten married there. They got their local permanent residency and then became citizens, whether it's Germany, UK, and so on. Now, many of them actually would like to go back to Lithuania and maybe raise their family in Lithuania. They want to invest, build businesses in Lithuania. But they would have to, if they want to retain the Lithuanian citizenship, they may need
Yeah.
to give up their foreign one, which nobody wants to do. So
Right.
we're going to see. I think, I mean, the most logical thing I believe is for Lithuania to change its constitution and
Yeah.
to allow dual citizenship. Funny thing is, they do have certain very limited programs where they do allow that. For example,
Hmm.
um, if you can prove, even if you've never set foot in Lithuania in your entire life, but you can prove that your ancestors were of Jewish origin and lived in Lithuania basically before like World War II or around that time, you are eligible to become a Lithuanian citizen, um, and you don't have to give up your other citizenships. So
Hmm.
Lithuania has this program because they may have sided a little bit with the German side more than they intended to during World War II.
Hmm.
And as a way, and a lot of Jews had to flee, and a lot of Jews really suffered. And so, as a way to kind of make up for that, especially families who had to leave, they created this program of being like, so if you're able to prove Jewish ancestry and that your ancestors lived in Lithuania at a particular time, you were eligible for a passport. Although I think
Hmm.
that's really cool, but I'm like, let's expand that
Yeah.
expansion.
Yeah.
And my law partner, so I was a practicing attorney for 10 years, and my law partner, interestingly enough, who has never been to Lithuania, her grandfather is Jewish and is from Lithuania, so she's eligible.
Wow.
So we kind of laughed about it. I was like, she can she can have the
Right.
Lithuanian passport
And you
and I
can't.
cannot. Right.
It's
Yeah.
interesting because when we came from the, so it was what became Ukraine. We had to give up our Soviet passports and citizenship. So we were, the reason I asked that question initially was because we were refugees who were effectively stateless until we got our U.S. citizenship here in the U.S. So we were only green card holders and did not have a passport for any other nation, while we were here at that time. So it's interesting how even the different republics had sort of different stories. Different Soviet republics had different stories or different processes. I do hope Lithuania, if you're listening,
Mm.
this is your note to change the rules and make it a little bit more open. Man, I should see if I have any. I don't think I have any Lithuanian I think everyone was from Ukraine for very many generations, but I can ironically get a Ukrainian passport now, probably. I haven't tried, but probably.
Mhm.
But unfortunately, it's a tough time right now for Ukraine. And from the selfish European perspective, I don't know that that's going to lead me into the EU anytime soon. But um,
Mhm.
anyway, interesting. Okay, so your family moved here. You were 13 years old, moved into suburban Michigan, which I agree is strange, random. You should have ended up in South Brooklyn,
Yeah.
where the rest of the
But
Russian-speaking immigrants went. But it's actually really cool that you had that because you arguably had a more quote unquote American, I would say, experience there. Okay, and so I guess you grew up there, right? I mean, you grew up basically in suburban
Mhm.
Michigan.
So
Um,
my high school, suburban Michigan. Then we moved 2 years in a town called Novi. Then we moved to Ann Arbor, which is from a town perspective much more interesting. Ann Arbor is larger, close to 200,000 people now. It's known for being the home for University of Michigan. So it's like from a town perspective, it was great. From my high school experience, I actually had a better experience in the suburban high school,
Mm.
super well organized school. So once we got integrated into the school, my experience with the school was amazing and we made good friends. It's just the idea of living in the suburbs, not having a walkable lifestyle was a little bit challenging. Yeah.
did you have any? Because I know you said your parents sort of had a business in Lithuania. Was entrepreneurship, if you will, or like owning a business, was this sort of what you always saw around you? Because I like to ask my guests usually if growing up they were more kind of studious and going to school, making sure they got good grades with a view towards a career, or were they more sort of kind of hustlers? You know what I mean? I mean, it sounded like you probably were hustlers because you're obviously trying to find snakes and raise them, maybe sell them. I don't know. But do you feel like growing up in that kind of a household, you had a little bit more of exposure to business, and kind of doing it on your own, or was it more kind of maybe the traditional Soviet thing where go to school, I don't know, become an engineer or scientist or mathematician and get a job?
I think I am entrepreneurial, and whether I was influenced by my environment or not, I think I would be entrepreneurial no matter what. I think it
Mm,
did help that my parents had a couple of businesses because it helped me understand that it's absolutely possible. I didn't have that sort of glass ceiling. But I don't think I fully understood my strengths until just a few years ago, right? Because there are different, and I also don't think entrepreneurship is for everybody. It's
mm,
not a goal you strive through. It's really who you are as a personality. For example, my dad, who has had a few businesses, I genuinely do not believe my dad is entrepreneurial. My dad is very smart. He was a nuclear physicist. He is one of the smartest people that I know. But to be an entrepreneur, you basically pretty much have to have severe ADHD and thrive in this like chaos of having to
mm,
do multiple tasks. And I think when you're someone super talented, like my dad and so many other individuals, you are actually going to be better off if you find a place, whether it's an employer or a company, where someone else is handling the 200 daily changing tasks, and they let you focus on what your strengths are, which could be, analytical analysis or creativity, just whatever your strengths. So um, I'm kind of grateful that my dad started a few different businesses, but I think people misalign being entrepreneurial and being smart.
mm,
You can be extremely smart, and becoming an entrepreneur may be, in a way, kind of a waste of your skills because you want to let everybody else handle,
mhm.
the basics and the admin, and focus your skill set on your strengths.
Yeah, definitely. And it's I agree with you 100%. And it's amazing that you had this awakening, I guess, if you will, after working as a lawyer for a while. I honestly went through the same thing myself. I did not grow up around entrepreneurs. I grew up around career, like both my parents, engineers, programmers, as many Soviet immigrants, I think, did in the US. And so worked for big companies, and that's what I knew. And it's funny that you mentioned glass ceiling, and I don't know in what context, if it's like in terms of salary or just general possibility, but I never even personally never even thought about starting a business. Like, actually, you joke around, oh, we should sell this, or wouldn't it be cool to make that? But actually going through the motions of starting a business could feel impossible if you've never seen someone do it before.
Mhm.
So it's really cool to see that. So you obviously went to University of Michigan, I guess your hometown college, which is also one of the best schools in the country. You studied economics, and so and I know you went to law school after that. Did you? I guess this is just asking about the career transition. Did you want to stay in finance or economics or something, or did you kind of always think to yourself, "I want to be an attorney"?
No. So being an attorney is something I thought about in passing, I think in high school. And then once I started college, I really I took an economics course because I didn't know what I wanted to do when I started
Mhm.
college, right? Kind of clueless. Frankly, I was just as clueless when I graduated college. Although I graduated early, I was 20 when I was done with undergrad, but I still was like clueless when what I wanted to do. The one thing I really dreamed of doing was I wanted to be a film director. But when I got into university, my parents really did not support that idea. They were like, this is insane. You will never have a job. You will have to wait tables. That's not a real job, because they came from the Soviet Union, where there were 10 film directors in the entire country making
Mhm.
government sponsored films.
Mhm.
They didn't realize what an enormous industry content creation, film creation, TV shows, that it already existed in the United States. And
Mhm.
frankly, neither did I. So I sort of was swayed by their opinions. And so I ended up picking economics because it's a course that I really liked, and graduated. I knew I wanted to go for an MBA, and I wanted to go for a really
Mm.
good MBA program. And top MBA programs want you to have a few years of experience. So I started working. I moved to Florida at the time for kind of family reasons, and started working. And when it was time to start applying for MBA programs, I learned of a few law firms, um, and what they were doing and how they expanded. And I remember thinking, I'm like, law is running your own business. Like, owning your own law firm is running a business,
Mhm.
except a lot of your competition is taken out because you can only own a law firm if you have a law degree.
Mhm.
So, in a way, like, you're getting into an area of business where other people are precluded from joining. And I remember thinking, well, MBA skills is something I can learn from books and through experience, but no one is going to give me a law license unless I actually go to law school. So I pivoted very last minute. I decided to go to law school, and like the last LSAT that year, and the applications were due in 6 weeks. Um, and in theory, that logic made sense. In practice, I then realized that once I became a lawyer, I also boxed myself in very much into practicing and learning how to practice. So, funny enough, I went into law still with the vision of being an entrepreneur later, and
Mhm.
then started my own law firm very early, and then got sucked into practicing. I don't regret it, but I ended up staying and practicing law longer than I originally anticipated that I would.
It's amazing that you had that mindset as somebody who, didn't really have lawyers in your family,
I
because
didn't know a
this
single lawyer when I went to law school. I remember, like, I was applying to law schools, and I'm like, shoot, I really should, I need to talk to a lawyer, any
yeah, right.
lawyer, about what the actual experience is like. And I didn't know a
Yeah.
single one.
That's
Uh,
hilarious. But again, that's so thoughtful and almost like super mature, like impressively mature, because I think that that's the kind of advice that I would give somebody who's thinking about law school now, who maybe is more entrepreneurial, but that's after having seen it for well over, a decade. So that it's really cool that you did that. So and okay, so you graduated, you went to University of Miami, you graduated, and you got a job, I guess, working at an immigration law firm. And I'm just curious, did oh, you went through the immigration process, but were you aware at all about immigration law? Was it something that had at all any connection to your personal experience, or did you honestly kind of find this job, as happens sometimes, and fall into immigration, by
um,
mistake, sort of?
by mistake, fall into immigration by mistake. um, I had zero interest in immigration law or the practice of immigration law. I went through the process. It didn't like impress me. It didn't,
Mhm.
stir anything in me. And then when I was in law school, my opinion of immigration law, like if someone asked me, what do you think about immigration law? Back then, I didn't think it was a very active practice of law. I
Mhm.
assumed you're filling out some forms, right? And I'm
Mhm.
like, if you're just filling out forms and sending them in, where's the practice of law? Where are the legal arguments and so on? So obviously, I didn't know what immigration law was, and therefore I had no interest. And in the last year of law school, never took an immigration law class. And in the
Mhm.
last year of law school, I heard about the CB5 program. A few things have happened. NPR did a story on it, and a friend from law school whose family was in real estate development and who himself was like kind of entrepreneurial. He came to me and he's like, listen, you speak Russian. We have all these Russians in South Florida. Have you heard about this EB-5 investor visa program? I'm like, nope. He's like, the gist is the government will give people green cards if they invest in businesses that create jobs. He was like, we can get a bunch of Russian investors and start doing projects. He's like, you should look into it. And that's what happened. I looked into the EB-5 program. Oh, I think that's my AirPods. I think the battery died.
I can't. Yeah, you're on mute now. Uh-oh.
I
Oh,
was
there you go.
muted. I don't know what
I can hear
happened.
you. Great.
But
I can hear you now.
but so a friend brings up this program. At the same time, my mom asks me to research options for her best friend. Because her best friend was considering relocating from Europe. She wanted to eventually retire in the US. And although her friend is an entrepreneur, she didn't want to be tied to running a business in the US. Like she wanted to eventually get a permanent status here, retire here, and so on. So I started researching all these immigration programs for my mom's best friend. And at the same time, I hear about EB-5, and that piqued my interest. I was like,
Mhm.
once I dove in to the EB-5 program, I'm like, this program is absolutely brilliant because I loved it from so many perspectives. I'm like, you're actually giving people an opportunity to earn their right to come to the United States, which I think is always nice. You're benefiting local economies. You are, and it's just such a great solution. At the same time, what shocked me is that it was a virtually unknown program. Like I've never heard about it. I knew so many high net worth individuals from abroad who were thinking about moving to the US and they didn't know how. So it's the EB-5 program that piqued my interest in immigration law. And that's what made me then choose immigration law once I got out of law school.
And I would say it also is beneficial that you had a background in economics. And I mean, I kind of skipped this, but you worked at JP Morgan for a few years.
Mhm.
And even though that's not necessarily directly related to EB-5, it puts you in this mindset or space of understanding financial obligations and just all of the sort of finance stuff that is part of the EB-5 program that maybe other lawyers might not be interested in. I mean, I remember in law school, the running joke, I'm sure it's across the board in every school, is like, oh, we're in law school because we hate math.
Yep.
which is
Hmm.
ironic because I remember the statistics showing that math majors and engineer majors in undergrad had the best LSAT scores because it's logic.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
still the joke in law school is, well, I hate math and therefore I'm going to be a lawyer. But this was where the intersection of law and math/finance was important. Okay, before we dive in, because this is now, I think, the part in your story where it sort of shifts to you becoming an attorney. You then had a practice and obviously eventually launched EB-5 support. Before we do that, I want to take a very, very quick pause just to say thank you to the second sponsor of the show, which is a company called Lex Reception. So for folks who do not know, Lex Reception is a legal intake, reception, and client support service. They provide phone call answering and message answering in real time. They schedule appointments. They basically help immigration law firms with 24-hour legal answering specialists. So if you're an immigration lawyer and forget about overnight or different time zones, if you're just busy or out in court or whatever, and you get a client or a prospect calling you or reaching out, you can have Lex Reception staff help you immediately follow up with them. A lot of statistics show, I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but they show that response times, especially initially, are some of the most biggest determining factors of whether or not a client goes with a law firm. So if you have a service that helps you answer inquiries quickly, you are more likely to get that client or retain that client. Lex Reception also has a tech side. They integrate with a number of different platforms like Clio, Practice Panther, LawPay, and more, so they can fit into your current workflow. So if you're interested, if you're an immigration lawyer or any law firm, frankly, and you're interested, check them out. There is a link in the show notes that will give you $250 off your first month. So check them out at lexreception.com. Okay. So, Irina, thank you. Back to you. You found EB-5s interesting, this sort of like overlap between business and finance and apparently immigration from an interesting standpoint. You eventually started your own practice, and you said pretty quickly, I mean, I think you worked at another firm for less than a year, and then you started your own firm. I don't want to dive into that too much because I want to get to EB-5 support. But obviously, you spent well over a decade practicing, as an immigration attorney. I guess you still are an immigration attorney.
Hmm.
But what did you I don't know, what was your experience like building this law firm? Was it what you expected, this kind of idea of starting a business, but then also but being a lawyer, and so therefore you can kind of capture a market? Were you able to still find it interesting once you started to do more EB-5s? I mean, yeah, what were some of the things that you took away from that experience?
Yeah, so I did start my practice very early. It's I generally, if you're practicing immigration law, that's not my advice. I think to become a good immigration attorney, you need about 5 years of experience. The reason why I was able to start my practice early is because I focused. When I started my practice, I actually opened it as a consulting firm for AB5. So when I got my first job, I got a job with a firm that had some EB5 experience. I went into it and I made myself an expert. Like I read everything that there was to read on EB5. Obviously, I read the regs, the law. I looked up prior cases that this law firm has done, read every memo. And by the way, all of this took less than a month. If you're focused and you want to become an expert in something, like it's not going to take you 5 years, right? If you have access to materials, you can read everything in less than a month. And now I knew more about EB5 than people who have been practicing immigration law for 20 years,
Mhm.
because over those 20 years, maybe they've been exposed to one or two cases. And so once I've kind of started focusing on EB5 in my in that law firm, got a little bit of practice, I quickly realized that what I wanted to do, law firms would not let me do because they looked at me as a new associate. I wanted to do business development. I wanted to travel to Eastern Europe. I wanted to educate people about this program, right? And so I understood that in a classic law firm environment, that was not going to happen. And that gave me the confidence to start my own practice. And initially, I said, I'm going to open up an EB5 consulting firm and actually help other immigration lawyers just with EB-5 cases and kind of
Mm.
focus on that. And I aligned myself. I knew I didn't know enough about general immigration, adjustment of status, eligibility, all the million different things that can arise in immigration, because I quickly learned that immigration law is one of the most complex and nuanced fields of law. So when I went on my own, I aligned myself with attorneys that were experts in other fields. And I just said, whenever I will have either questions or clients for other matters, I
Mhm.
will refer them out. Early on, at the time, we didn't know this was going to happen, but the woman who became my law partner, she was an attorney with a few years of experience. She was brilliant. She was planning to go on her own. So I may have nudged her to go on her own at the same time that I went on my own, because she was a more classic attorney. She was like, "Oh, I need all these years of experience. Oh, running your own law office must be so difficult. Being an
Mhm.
entrepreneur is so difficult." And then she told me, she was like, "Then I see you doing this and you're like a few years younger, less experience." And I figured, well, if she can do it, I can do it.
Nice.
And that is a big thing about entrepreneurship. And that's, if you don't have any friends or family who have their own businesses, you really think it's so complex.
Mhm.
But in reality is, if you have a skill set, starting a business to serve that skill set will take you less than a week. Like, the building the basic infrastructure is really not that complex. So anyway, we decided to rent office space together, and that gave me that infrastructure. So I wasn't worried about not giving people the right advice, because I always had her, and
Mhm.
she then became the youngest board certified immigration attorney in Florida. So I knew she was very reliable on those additional skill sets. And we paired it with my EB-5 skills. And from then on, it started to grow.
And did you, I mean, end up serving Eastern Europe? Like, did you do the things you wanted to do, travel Eastern Europe and build the business and sort of try to, not just help with the EB-5 side, but also help, I don't know, investors understand the implications and meet with, I don't know, projects, so builders, real estate companies? Did you get to do all of those things as the firm kind of grew?
Yep. I started doing all of the things that I had a vision for, and I
Mhm.
learned that some of those things were working exactly how I envisioned them, and other things were not working at all, or certain things were going to take much longer. I find that generally my theories are good, but my understanding of the timing of how
Mhm.
how long it's going to take for things to happen can be off. I expect that people will react much faster. Like, if you tell them something, they're going to instantly get it and respond. In reality, people need more time to think about it, go back to it, read it, and so on. But yes, I started developing the Eastern European market. At some point, I ended up representing 30% of all Russians that were doing EB-5 cases. Not that it
Amazing.
grew to become a huge market, but it went from 5 cases a year to 100 cases a year. And because I was kind of at the forefront of, working with that community specifically, I would have, 30 clients a year from that market. And then what I didn't get to do is exactly what you brought up. I really didn't get to review projects, because as an immigration attorney, and yes, having the banking background helped, because I could analyze basic things about the capital stack. I knew how projects were being financed. But at the same time, I was not a securities attorney. But more importantly, no one was paying me for that service. So, as an
Mm.
immigration attorney, you cannot provide financial advice. You're not a licensed investment broker, and you're not getting paid by the project if you refer a client to them. You're not getting paid by the client because you're technically not doing project due diligence and securities review. I tried. Actually, early on, I realized that there were so many different projects that were coming out, but they were all very different. And investors really could benefit from professional due diligence and professional advice. So back in the day, I tried to bring in other professionals to help my clients, whether they were CPAs or securities lawyers. I tried to approach a number of licensed securities brokers and tell them, hey, guys, come to the EB-5 side, study some of these projects, help my clients make the right selection. But they were so deterred by all the complexities of the immigration requirements.
Mhm.
So I couldn't convince financial professionals to come to our side because they didn't understand immigration law. As you know, immigration lawyers don't know the financial side. Long story short, that's what eventually led me to go in and getting my own FINRA licenses, because I saw that that was an unmet need. I could
Mhm.
help clients with sourcing their funds, which is the bulk of their petition. But when it came to project selection, I really felt like they deserved more help and more review and more attention. Um, and that's why eventually I became a licensed investment broker, so that now I get to review projects and really guide clients through that process.
Were you or are you allowed to do that while also simultaneously being an immigration attorney? Or do you sort of
You
have to just do one or the other professionally?
you can be an attorney and a FINRA broker, and you can represent an investor both as an attorney and they're a FINRA broker. Um, some people worry, they ask, like, doesn't it create a conflict of interest? And I actually don't believe it creates a conflict of interest, because your client is still the same person. You're
Mhm.
still, as an attorney, you're supposed to do what's best for your investor client. As an investment broker, you're supposed to act in their best interest. So
Mhm.
your fiduciary duties are to the same person. You don't, as an investment broker, I do not have fiduciary duties to the projects. They're not my clients. I may get paid by them from, their fundraising budget if one of my investors invests. But my fiduciary duty is 100% to the investor, and that's who I represent. So you can be an attorney and a FINRA broker. I personally chose to leave the practice of law for two reasons. Number one, when you do serve both as an immigration attorney and as a FINRA broker, it creates compliance issues. As a FINRA broker, you're super highly regulated. So I, as a FINRA broker, must use only a specific archived email, and I can only use WhatsApp to communicate via text with my clients. So it's either email or WhatsApp text, which are also archived. And FINRA, the Financial Regulatory Authority, actually comes to the brokerage every 3 to 4 years and does a proactive audit on our case files, on our project files, to make sure we're doing our job in the best interest of the client,
Mhm.
right? By the way, no bar, New York bar, Florida bar doesn't do that to attorneys. Although they regulate attorneys, an attorney only gets in trouble if somebody complains. FINRA is much stricter. They actually proactively check on you to see how you're doing your job. And that's all great. I think it all benefits investors. The problem is when you're also a lawyer, FINRA will want to archive your email
Mm.
that you use for your clients on your legal side, and that can create all sorts of privacy issues,
Mm.
because these clients could be also discussing things with you pertaining to your brother, their sister, that have nothing to do with their EB-5 transaction. So I found that the cross pollination and the strict requirements applied to FINRA were going to eventually carry over to the law practice, and it was going to get messy because there were a lot of non-EB-5 clients in the practice. So that was one reason that I wanted to separate. But the bigger reason is actually to do things well, to do project due diligence well, it's a full-time job. I
Mhm.
fly all over the US. I visit the projects. I interview not only the people running the projects, I go and I interview people in town, what's going on, like in the area. I interview competitors to gain a better understanding of the chances and the likelihood of success of this project. That's a full time job. Being a good immigration attorney,
Also a
like,
full-time job.
I would say three. It's like
Right.
three jobs, because
Right.
things change in immigration law daily. So just
Yeah.
to keep up with all the changes, you have to be fully present. And then you have to be present there for your clients. Like when I had my law firm towards the end, we had a team of more than 10 people. And that's fantastic. I had this amazing support system, but clients at the end of the day still want to talk to the lead partner, at least from time to time. So it was a choice of like picking quality. I wanted to make sure that I could provide the type of quality project selection services that I truly believe investors deserve. And most importantly, I never wanted to keep taking on immigration clients without, making sure I can provide quality services there. So that's why I fully walked away in 2022, cut ties, and came to because I did both for a couple of years, was a broker and still practicing. And in 2022, I stopped practicing law completely.
So tell me, and everyone who's listening, what is EB-5 support? What does it do? Who do you help? Like, who are your, clients or your target audience, I guess?
Thanks for asking. So we right now serve three um, three groups of people. Our primary service is we work with investors on EB-5 project selection. So when an investor talks to their attorney, they determine EB-5 is the right option for them. Then that client gets introduced to us, and we interview the client, pre-qualify them, and based on their needs, we will propose multiple different project options. We'll educate them about the different options, the risks, pros, cons, and help them make an educated decision. Behind the scenes, we're constantly looking at different EB-5 deals that are coming out, pre-select the ones that we think are going to be good for our investors, put them through our own independent FINRA compliant process of due diligence. Like I have a whole team on the brokerage side that does this due diligence, and only projects that pass our due diligence are going to be options that I will discuss with investors.
Mm.
So that's our primary service, is we help investors pick a project, right? And we try to make it super streamlined for them so that it's really usually only a few hours of conversation with me that help them get there. But since I stopped practicing law, and since I saw such a big need in our legal community, like when I wanted to learn about EB-5, it was impossible. I remember part of why I got into this space is because I couldn't find lawyers that knew how to do EB-5. When I was looking for a lawyer for my mom's best friend, couldn't find lawyers that knew how to do EB-5. That was 15 years ago. Fast forward today, still, my estimation is that 95% of immigration lawyers have never seen an EB-5 case.
Mhm.
And when it's such a niche practice, people just don't have access to resources, they don't have access to tools. So when I stopped practicing law, I had this idea. I'm like, well, you know what? I filed over 700 cases in the last 10 years. I have training materials that I created for my associates, for my paralegals. I have all this wealth, 10 years of like knowledge in this space. I didn't want to let it just go to waste. So I decided to make it available to the community. So I created what we call EB-5 support for attorneys, which is a completely complementary initiative. So it's a community. I put out all my training materials on a portal online. Any immigration attorney can go log in and look up tutorials, checklists. I do like almost monthly video tutorials and different topics. And then we have a video library there for all these different subtopics. And I created a WhatsApp chat group just for questions on EB-5 because I didn't want lawyers who got access to this training material to get to their first case and
Mhm.
then feel lost. Like they have a question, they have nowhere to go. So I wanted there to be an ongoing community. And as of last week, we are at 400 members in EB-5
Wow.
WhatsApp chat group, EB-5 support for
Congrats.
attorneys. Thank you. So it's now become a very lively community. We keep it very on topic, only EB-5 related news and updates. I answer a lot of the questions myself. Well, I used to answer all the questions myself, but now the community has grown. We have some top EB-5 litigators. We have a former IPO, so the Investor Program Office, that's the department that reviews all EB-5 petitions. So a USCIS adjudicator who was chief compliance officer at the EB-5 department is in our chat. So now he answers a lot of questions. And it's just a thriving community where if you ever want to do an EB-5 case, you will never feel alone because you know exactly where to go to get good resources or to have your questions answered. And my latest thing that I started doing with EB-5 support for attorneys is I rolled out a series like of workshops because I
Mhm.
realized that that's how people learn well if you get together in a group or if you do like we did both virtual and in person and actually practice doing a case together. So we did a number of workshops. I have over 100 people who have taken the workshop, and those have been amazing. It's exhausting.
It's almost a second
Teaching,
job.
it is. So I limit, then people ask me, they're like, how are you able to do all of this? So
Right.
using technology is amazing because we record everything we do. So the library keeps building. And then the workshops are different because I have to be present there, but essentially that's one full day out of a month that I dedicate to doing these workshops. Our next one is June 16th in San Diego, the day before AILA, doing that in San Diego. And I will take a little break from workshops this summer as we're heading for an EB-5 filing deadline, but it's been really cool. I do like the EB-5 support for attorneys. I plan to continue growing that community. My vision is that every single attorney should know what EB-5 is and be able to competently present it to appropriate clients
Mhm.
because it's very unfair. There's so many individuals that could have benefited from this program and they had consulted with multiple attorneys and they never learned about it, right? And I understand from the attorney's perspective, you're not going to talk about something that you don't know about, right? So I do want EB-5 to be a tool. I want it to be accessible so that attorneys can really determine whether or not it's a workable solution for the client and the client can decide if they want to use it or not.
Speaking of which, I think that a lot of, I mean, at least from my experience when I was practicing, I always assumed that an EB-5 client would be, ultra high net worth, some sort of royalty or some sort of, you know, but it doesn't, there are a lot of people that are in America, a lot of H-1Bs have been doing this and folks on other, in other statuses that have very high salaries and or have just saved, a bunch of cash over the years. And, they could be eligible for an EB-5 as well as a different way to get onto that green card path. And so I feel
Mhm.
like even when I started learning about that, part of that I learned from you and your content that EB-5 is actually more accessible to people than I think is how it's branded. And so to your
Mhm.
point, I guess if you teach more attorneys who maybe focus on tech companies, and employees of traditional, jobs, they might find that well, actually, EB-5 could be an option for them as well. It's not like, yeah, it's not like the billionaires only, right? From all over the world. It's good regular people.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what. Most billionaires, if they're not billionaires in the US, they do not want to become US residents. So, EB-5 traditionally, I almost never saw ultra high net worth
Mm,
individuals because if your net worth was over 15, 20 million, you didn't want to become a US tax resident. You may want to come and visit, but not
mm,
become a US tax resident. Traditionally, I see that EB-5 is utilized a lot by individuals whose net worth is between 2 million and 10, but that's the common thing that a lot of attorneys say, oh, my clients are not rich like that. You have absolutely no idea. Like you never ever know. And I always tell attorneys, like, if you work with asylum cases or marriage cases only, you absolutely have no idea who has $800,000 to invest. It happens all the time that they will surprise you. But let me talk about some giant pools of clients that a lot of attorneys work with, who a high percentage of those are EB-5. They're capable of doing EB-5 and they do them a lot. So, like you mentioned, H-1Bs, your classic H-1Bs, especially Indian born, Chinese born, they're making a few $100,000 a year here, and their path to a green card may be 15 or 20 years through their employer. And they have other opportunities either to start their own businesses or to go for a for a better position if they can get a green card. And usually there's two of them in a household. Like you can have two software engineers, two doctors, and so on. After working here in the US for a few years, many of them have the capital to do EB-5, and they have a tremendous financial benefit because they're, it's not from investing the 800,000. The 800,000 is going to go into projects that generates almost no return. But if they can get a green card, they're free agents. So they can go and improve and get jobs that pay them way higher wages. They can become co-founders of startups. And so there are a lot of H-1Bs right now who are utilizing the EB-5 program. If you have E2 clients, a ton of them are EB-5 eligible as well, because after they've been here on E2 visas for a few years, maybe they want to sell their business, maybe they want to exit, maybe their kids are aging out and they simply cannot afford to wait anymore. Many of them also have 800,000 that they can invest. And here's a kicker that a lot of people don't think about. Almost every international student at a top, I would say top 150 universities in the United States is coming from a family wealth that can easily afford EB-5. And let me dissect that. If you're an international student in top 150 universities, your out of state non resident tuition plus living expenses is about 80 to 100 grand a year. So that means your parents can afford to pay close to $500,000 just for one kid's college education, right? Typically, a family that can afford that has a few million, right? And they're so highly vested in that child's ability to stay in the United States that they're usually very willing and very able to invest. So I can't tell you how many clients I've worked with over the years that were upset that they were not told about the EB-5 program earlier.
Mm,
Like they're like, we've spoken to a million attorneys, nobody even mentioned it.
mm. Wow.
I could have done this before my kids turned 21. So instead of now sponsoring one kid with 800,000, I could have done this when all three of my kids were under 21, and we could have gotten them green cards. You know, one investment could have gotten me a green card for all three of them. So I just think the information, good, competent, clear information needs to be out there.
Mm.
And then it's up to each individual family to decide if it's appropriate for them, if they have the means, and if they want to move forward.
And I think there are other options where, I mean, let's say you're an E2 visa holder in the US and you've already invested X amount of dollars into your business. Maybe you could theoretically turn that into an EB-5 business and use some of the money that you've already invested towards that 800,000. I mean, if I understand correctly, at a high level, I know
Sometimes,
I'm sure there are
yeah.
nuances, but um,
Yeah, there's direct EB-5. So EB-5 divides in two programs, direct and regional center. The direct EB-5 program requires, so you run your own business
right,
and you have to generate 10 new jobs. They have to be full-time W-2 workers and they have to be permanent positions. It is totally theoretically possible, right? So some E2 people will start at an E2, and then once their business grows and they generate 10 jobs, you can file for a direct EB-5. Generally, I don't love the direct EB-5 program. I think it's very restrictive. So very few
mm,
businesses actually qualify. But also, how many small businesses need 10 full-time new jobs, right?
right,
So, but it's absolutely knowing what direct EB-5 is something every immigration attorney should know.
exactly.
The regional center program is what 95% of all EB-5 applications are filed through. And the regional center program just says if an American company obtains a license of a regional center from USCIS, what that allows them to do is to pull together multiple investors, like bring together multiple investors. You pull all of their money together and you invest that into larger projects. So it could be a construction of a Marriott hotel, a hospital, a charter school, whatever, large project. And these investors will get credit for all the jobs created by this project But here's a huge thing which made the regional center EB-5 program so successful. Regional centers get credit for all directly and indirectly created jobs.
Hmm.
So if I'm an investor and I'm doing direct and I build a little boutique hotel, I only get credit for the service workers at the hotel. If a regional center pulls together investors and builds a hotel, they get credit for all the construction jobs, service people jobs, and other people who like actually provide vendor services to the hotel. So as a result, meeting the job creation requirement is just easier through the regional center program. And it's often easier for the investor because you can be basically a passive investor. Like you get some voting rights,
Hmm.
right, to satisfy your involvement and management requirements, but you're not managing day-to-day operations. You pick a project, and there's a whole team of professionals with history in the United States that are managing the day-to-day operations of that business.
I think ultimately the point is that the more lawyers know, the more they can present different options to their clients. And to your point of direct EB-5 isn't, an option, but maybe they do have the funds to do a regional center. That's something that they should know about. It's actually crazy for me to think about how many people, are frustrated because their lawyers never asked them because maybe they assumed that they don't have the money, right? I mean,
Ru- And
it's
that's
just
such a
silly. It's yeah,
yeah, it's such a terrible assumption.
right.
I have so many clients who were on TPS for years. So if you're a lawyer, you work with TPS clients, you don't know who has families, their friends. I have right now a bunch of a number, I'm saying a bunch, but a number of Ukrainian investors. And some of them actually received a donation from their American friends. Because you just don't know what options are out there. People are like, even if your investor may not be making that much money, knowing that this option exists opens up a door because they may have friends, they may have family who want to help them,
Hmm.
right? And absolutely, there we always had a question in our intake because we are trying to find every possible legal option, for the clients. And there was always a question like, do you have 800,000, or back then it was $500,000 for a possible investment? Do you want to know about the investor visa option? It's just definitely a question you want to ask, and
Yeah,
they can decide if it's
right.
appropriate or not.
Exactly. Worst case scenario, they say no, and you move on.
Mhm.
Um, okay, so EB-5 support from an immigration lawyer standpoint is it helps them, learn about the program. It gives them a lot of resources about the program. If they're trying to get into EB-5, is probably the best place to go to, you know, do the work in terms of research and practice and networking with people who have experience. It sounds like also because you have relationships with or you learn about different projects, you also can be sort of a partner to them where if they end up getting a client and they want maybe that client needs some help in terms of figuring out who the right, investor or project to go to is, maybe they can even come to you and say, do you have a list of like we have a client that says this is a possibility. They have no idea where to start. And so maybe they can go to you and say, can you recommend a couple of options for an investment program. Does that sound fair? Is that something that
That's
you also yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly what we do. I always tell specifically immigration attorneys, like, we support you in two ways. Like, my training program, that's just me giving back to the community. So that's your resource, however you want to use it, when you need it, use it. And then another way that I can support you is when you do have clients, and most of those clients are going to end up doing the regional center program. Those clients eventually are going to ask you, okay, which project do I invest in? You, as an immigration attorney, are not supposed to be giving any financial advice. And that's where you can refer them to professionals. And that's my job as a FINRA broker, is to work with investors and help them understand their project options and pick one. And that's another reason, actually, why we're starting to see that the immigration program overall is becoming more popular, because it was a big challenge when I started practicing I focused on EB-5, so at least I got to know different companies. But it is a problem when your client hires you to do the legal work and then you cannot find an appropriate professional to help them with the project selection, right? Because it's kind of like if you can sell them the car, but they don't know, there's nobody to give them driving lessons.
Right.
Like it's those services kind of need to be like, ideally they're complementing services. So you want to have the right vendors to provide that second service to your client for sure.
Okay, so as a final question here, what do you, because I guess it's such a specific service that you provide and within such a specific industry, what's the sort of near-term future for EB-5 support? I mean, I know right now, kind of practically speaking, there are filing deadlines. And so right now you're pushing to get information out, help people file as much as, or at least expose their clients as much as possible and maybe file some EB-5s before there is the potential, hopefully, renewal of the program. But I don't know, from a business standpoint, what are you thinking about for the company? Is it just more of the same, or do you think there's other opportunities within EB-5 for the business? What are you thinking about?
Oh, absolutely. So, as a founder of EB-5 support, there are other opportunities that I can't wait to explore after this deadline. So, for the next few months, we are super, super focused on our investor clients. So, right now, we're already processing dozens and dozens of investors who need project selection. And we're obviously going to see more people coming in who need this service in the next 4 months because those investors who filed their petition by September 30th of 2026 are grandfathered in from any future legislative changes. Because the EB-5 Regional Center program is up for renewal next year, September 2027, there are going to be possible legislative changes. It may not get renewed right away. So investors who want to protect themselves and know that they will be able to finish their immigration process, they're all trying to rush and pick a project, invest, and file by September 30th. So for the next 4 months, we're very focused on representing our investor clients. Once that deadline passes, I actually would love to expand services for real estate developers in the EB-5 space. They're kind of an underserved group. So there are a lot of real estate developers who hear about EB-5 investors and EB-5 financing, and they're very curious. And they may be building amazing projects that really fit the needs and that investors would be interested in. But right now, there's not a lot of educational services for them. There are law firms who can help them with the legal documentation, right, for their project filing. But services like understanding where to find investors, how to then manage your investor workflow, like all these internal procedures. So we are going to be rolling out specific EB-5 support for developers. Right now, I just do kind of occasional consulting, but there's going to be a whole product that's going to help them understand what they need to do if they're using EB-5 financing, how to find investors, all the compliance elements. So there's going to be that growth. And as
Cool.
an investment broker, I'm also expanding out of the EB-5 program. So there are going to be other EB-5 investments pay investors a nominal rate of return. So these are not profitable investments. They meet the program requirements, they create the jobs. You're there to get your green card through this program, but you're not making money. And obviously, as a licensed investment broker, I want to give my clients opportunities if they have additional capital or when they get their EB-5 capital back, if they want to reinvest it for something that has potential future growth. These are some of the products that we're also onboarding. So there's going to be there's a lot of growth, and I'm very excited about it.
Yeah, that's super exciting. Well, this was really awesome. I learned a lot. I hope that folks who are listening. By the way, we had a couple comments just to bring this up from Roberta previously, but she said about talking about dual citizenship. She said Costa Rica told me I had to renounce my U.S. citizenship, but I never did. I like the advantages of having both passports. So just the idea of like different countries have different rules. Just as a final thought, I'd like to ask this question as the sort of to get the guest's perspective, a lot of people say or ask, what advice would you give your younger self, or what advice would you give to another business owner? I like to flip the question and ask, what advice are you listening to right now that's helping you go through whatever, changes or growth you're going through with the business? What's some advice that's on your mind these
That's
days? Yeah.
actually advice that's on my mind.
Yeah.
It's just telling you before we started this call, I became very intentional about surrounding myself with other founders because growing a business in a vacuum is so much harder than it needs to be.
Mm,
There's so I joined one of the groups I recently joined. Is called the Founders Club, and it's literally founders from every business organization or business environment. There are tech founders, there's providers, services, lawyers, artists. And so what's great is they do different activities where they bring founders together. They do monthly small groups. I'm learning something every day, but what's great is I can meet with my monthly group of other founders and I can tell them, okay, this is an issue I'm having right now. And probably somebody in this group has already had this issue and already
mm,
it took them 3 years to develop a solution. So now you just saved yourself 3 years. And a lot of times you're learning things proactively. Like I knew I needed we are very tech forward, right? So I'm streamlining a lot of the things we do. I don't like manual, I'm like improving how information gets presented to investors. From my groups, I am learning how to appropriately use AI to customize it to your business.
mm.
So right now we have an individual we hired who's helping us build our agents so that we can just do a better job. You're not going to take away the expertise or the personal, touch, but do our job a little bit better and faster. So the advice that I'm listening, oh, this is like a personal thing I had to do. I made a commitment to myself to learn to use technology better. Because although I'm tech savvy in comparison to other lawyers, the reality is I get annoyed with tech. And when there's always someone younger working for me, I ask them to problem solve.
Mm.
But I think we are at such an age where tech is going to take over more and more of what we're doing and it's going to improve it. It's very important to not fall behind because the
Mhm,
moment you stop doing something for a couple of months, it just becomes, it's like working out. If you haven't
mhm,
worked out in 2 years, it's much harder to get back into it. So I think the advice is learn what AI can and cannot do. It is not a be all solution, and you do not want to just dump your problems on AI and have it give you the wrong information, but start really playing with it and learning. Um, I don't know what other, and surround yourself with other people that you can learn from very intentionally.
I love that. And frankly, that's both good advice that you could listen to now and also advice to give to somebody at any stage of their business. Um, I should do that more. I don't do enough of the sort of founders group thing. I do tend to. I travel a lot. I go to a lot of conferences, but those are all people in our industry. So I'm going to take your advice, and I'm going to look into some of these founders groups and see what's interesting to me, what I can join.
Mhm.
So
There's some
thank.
some great ones, I'm sure, in New York. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure. Although, if I could travel somewhere for you know, a founder event, that would be awesome. Well, Irina, thank you so much for giving me your time this afternoon and sharing your story. It's super interesting. I think where can people find you? That's what I wanted to ask you. LinkedIn for sure, so they could search your name. But where else could people find you on other social media platforms? Or
I am on all of them. I'm on Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook. We just because people use different platforms, and
Mhm.
I want our information to be accessible. All of that. I have a team member that updates all of that. So you just add me to whatever platform you're comfortable with out of the social media. We're also on TikTok, and you will get updates, and you won't be able to kind of lose touch. Of course, you can always go to EB-5 support. That's eb-5support.com. And we have all of our updates on that website. But I like adding people on social media or on LinkedIn because you may not need something today. right?
Right.
You may have a need 2 years from now, or maybe there's going to be maybe your clients cannot benefit from this today, but when the program is renewed next year, there could be additional benefits that become really relevant, and you want to know about them. So add me on LinkedIn and Instagram, and we'll keep you guys in the loop. Oh, and I'll see everybody at AILA National, I hope.
That's right. For anybody who's listening or watching this before June, middle of June, AILA, the American Immigration Lawyers Association, come to the annual conference. You will have a booth, Irina. I will have a booth for Laborless. So folks can come hang out with us in person in San Diego. All right, Irina, thank you so much. Really appreciate your time, and have a happy Friday. Thanks for being on the show.
Thanks so much, Roman.
Awesome. What a wonderful conversation. I really hope that folks who were listening or watching took something away from an EB-5 perspective. You don't have to become an expert, but you should at least learn something about the program to help your clients with it. Quick thank you once again to the main sponsor of the show, 8 a.m. DocketWise. So as a reminder, DocketWise is an end-to-end immigration case management platform that provides best-in-class immigration forms, customizable questionnaires that help you fill out those forms in an automated way, industry-leading integrations, including with my company, Laborless, great customer service. They provide a lot of content for the immigration industry. So the website has blogs, ebooks, podcasts, so much information, kind of like what Irina's doing with EB-5, but broader immigration topics, so that you as an immigration attorney or professional in the industry can learn more about the practice. So big thank you to 8 a.m. DocketWise. Do check them out in the link in the show notes, or visit them at 8am.com/DocketWise. So with that, thank you everybody for joining, for tuning in, for the comments, and see you next week on the next episode. In the meantime, have a wonderful weekend, and peace out.